Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
It's 2025, and a lot of us are hoping for some positive changes.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to Canadian immigration, you know?
Sure.
But we're already seeing some unexpected challenges
Mm-hmm.
popping up, and one of the big ones we're seeing is around visitor records.
Right.
So in this deep dive, we're going to try to unpack this whole visitor records situation,
Okay.
figure out why it's happening, what it means for families who are visiting or planning to visit Canada.
Sounds good.
Joining me for this deep dive is an immigration expert.
An immigration lawyer.
So you know all about this stuff.
I do my best.
So yeah, let's dive right in.
Okay.
For those who might not be familiar with visitor records, could you just give us like a quick explanation of what they are?
Sure. So
And why they're important?
if you imagine you're coming to Canada to work and your kids come with you, a visitor record is like a temporary permission slip for them to stay in Canada while you're working here.
Yep.
And up until fairly recently, this was a pretty straightforward process.
Right, like everyone understood it.
Yeah, it was pretty common.
You get the visitor record.
Yep.
Everything's good.
Everything's good.
But now things have gotten, well,
Yeah, a little more complicated.
a little messy, shall we say.
Yeah.
So what's changed? Like, what's causing all this confusion around visitor records now?
Well, the real problem is there's this disconnect between what families have always kind of been led to believe about visitor records and how they're actually being treated, like what's happening in practice.
Okay, so like what they think is going to happen
Right.
versus what's actually happening.
Exactly. And that's created a lot of stress and a lot of uncertainty for families who are now facing potential separation.
Oh, wow. So we're talking about like serious consequences here.
Yeah, serious consequences.
Not just like a little bit of paperwork.
Not just a little bit of paperwork.
This is like families being split up.
Right.
So what is it specifically that's causing this disconnect?
So the core of the problem, I would say, boils down to how Canadian immigration law looks at work permits
Okay.
versus visitor records
Right.
and how they treat re-entering Canada.
So two different things, two different sets of rules.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
for work permits, there are really clear regulations if you leave Canada and come back. Your work permit is still valid when you return.
Makes sense.
But for visitor records, it's not so clear.
Okay.
The law doesn't specifically lay out how leaving and returning to Canada affects a visitor record that was originally issued for a longer period.
So there's like this gray area.
A bit of a gray area there, yeah.
It's not super clear how it's supposed to work.
Right, it's not super clear, and it mostly focuses on that initial 6-month stay that you get when you first come to Canada.
Okay, so that part's clear.
That part's clear.
But anything beyond that?
Anything beyond that gets a little
Fuzzy.
fuzzy.
And it sounds like it's not even just like the law itself being unclear.
Right.
But maybe even the different government agencies involved aren't on the same page about this.
Yeah, exactly.
So who are the main players here? Like, which agencies are we talking about?
So you got CBSA
CBSA, okay.
and IRCC.
IRCC. So for those of us who might not be fluent in government acronyms,
Yeah.
what do those stand for?
So CBSA is the Canada Border Services Agency.
Okay, so the folks at the border.
Folks at the border.
Yeah.
Yep. And IRCC is Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada.
Right. So IRCC is the one who's processing the applications and all that.
The applications, exactly.
And CBSA is letting you in the country.
That's right.
So are these two, like, are they fighting? Are they disagreeing on this?
Well, it's not quite a fight, but it is a classic case of he said, she said.
Because she said, okay.
Yeah, so CBSA being the ones at the border,
Right.
they seem to be operating under the assumption that a visitor record stays valid until its expiry date,
Okay.
if you travel outside of Canada.
So even if you leave and come back,
Exactly.
you're still good.
You're still good. But then you've got IRCC, the ones who handle the extension applications.
Right.
And they seem to be taking a much stricter stance.
Oh, really?
They're saying that if you leave and return, you might need to apply for a new visitor record within 6 months of your return.
So even though the original one might still have like a year left on it,
Right.
you might need to get a whole new one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's where the confusion comes in.
Yeah, that's super confusing.
Families think they're good to go,
Right.
and then IRCC throws a curveball.
Ooh.
And it really puts them in a difficult situation.
So what happens in those situations?
So if you're a family and you've come back to Canada and you're trying to extend your children's stay and you get hit with this
Curveball?
curveball, what are your options?
Yeah, are you just out of luck?
Well, it can create some real challenges.
Yeah.
For example, we've seen cases where parents, they get their work permit extensions, no problem.
Okay.
But then the children's visitor record extensions are denied.
Denied, just like flat out denied.
Denied.
Oh, wow. So what happens then? Are families forced to separate?
It's a real possibility.
Mm.
Yeah, families facing this situation could end up having to fight lengthy and expensive legal battles
Oh.
just to keep their families together.
So not only are they dealing with the stress of like, trying to work and
Right.
live in a new country,
Yeah.
but now they might have to hire lawyers and go to court.
Exactly. And on top of that, there's just the emotional stress of not knowing whether you'll be able to stay together as a family.
Oh, that's awful.
It's really difficult.
What about study permits?
Study permits.
Couldn't families just apply for study permits for their kids?
Yeah, that's a question a lot of people have.
Yeah, and like avoid this whole visitor record mess.
Right. But it's not always that simple.
Okay, why not?
So if a family is visa exempt
Okay.
and they apply for their work permits in person at the border,
Uh-huh.
they can't simultaneously apply for study permits for their kids at the same time?
They can't?
No, those have to be submitted online separately.
So you can't just like do it all at once
Right.
while you're at the border.
Unfortunately not.
Okay, so if you go the in-person route
Right.
for the work permits,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of stuck with the visitor record route for your kids.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck.
And even if they could apply for study permits, like, are there other reasons why families might not want to do that?
There are actually.
Okay.
So, for example, in British Columbia,
EC, yeah.
study permit holders have to pay monthly healthcare premiums,
Okay.
but people on visitor records don't.
Oh, so it's like a cost thing.
Exactly.
So families might actually choose the visitor record to save money on healthcare,
Right.
but then they run into these reentry problems.
Exactly. It's like they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Totally. And it just highlights how messy this whole situation is.
Yeah, it really does.
So we've got families facing potential separation,
Mm-hmm.
legal battles,
Mm-hmm.
a system that doesn't seem to be working very well for them. I mean, what does this say about Canada's reputation as like a welcoming and inclusive country?
Yeah, it certainly raises some questions.
Yeah, it seems like we're saying, come to Canada,
Uh-huh.
contribute to our economy,
Yeah.
but don't expect things to be easy
Right.
or predictable
Yeah, or fair even.
when it comes to keeping your family together.
Exactly, and that's not the message we want to be sending,
No, definitely not.
especially if we want to be seen as a welcoming and inclusive place.
Right.
This kind of situation really contradicts that message.
It does, and it makes you wonder, like, is this difference in approach between the agencies, like CBSA and IRCC, is that intentional or is it just like a miscommunication?
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
without being a fly on the wall in those meetings.
Right.
But regardless of the cause,
Yeah.
the impact on families is very real.
And it's significant.
It's significant. Yeah, it's not just paperwork. This is about real people's lives.
Right. People with hopes and dreams.
Exactly.
Trying to build a life here.
And they're facing these potentially life-altering consequences.
And the stress must be enormous.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, just imagine like the emotional toll
Yeah.
of not knowing if you're going to be able to stay together as a family.
It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and the disruption to the children's lives, like
Yeah.
having to move,
Potentially losing healthcare access?
all of that.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden.
It really is, and it makes me wonder, like, if this were happening to Canadian citizens,
Right.
would there be more public outcry?
That's a good question.
Like, would the government be more proactive in finding a solution?
It's hard to say, but it does make you think about the different standards that are applied sometimes.
Right. Like, we often take for granted the rights
Uh-huh.
and privileges that
Mhm.
come with citizenship.
Absolutely.
But newcomers face a much more precarious path.
They do. It's a very different experience.
It is, and I think this situation really highlights that.
It does.
It's a reminder that we need to hold our government accountable for treating everyone fairly
Yes,
and humanely,
absolutely.
regardless of their immigration status.
Regardless of their status.
So what can we do about this?
Well, there are a few things.
Are there any potential solutions on the horizon?
There are some legal challenges currently underway,
Okay.
and those could potentially bring about some much-needed clarity
Okay.
and consistency to the system.
So there's hope for a positive outcome.
I'd say there's cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism. Okay.
Because these legal challenges could really force the government to address those inconsistencies
Right.
and create a more predictable and fair process for families.
And that's what we want.
That's the goal.
A fair and predictable process.
Exactly.
But what about in the meantime?
In the meantime,
What can families do if they're facing this situation right now?
the most important thing is to seek legal advice
Oh.
as early as possible.
So talk to a lawyer.
Yeah, there are immigration lawyers who specialize in these types of cases, and they can really help families navigate the complexities of the system.
Right, because it is complex.
It is very complex.
And it's easy to get lost in all the rules and regulations.
Very easy.
So having a lawyer on your side can be a huge help.
Huge help.
But beyond legal action,
Okay.
what about public awareness?
Public awareness.
Like, can raising awareness about this issue help bring about change?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The more people understand the challenges that families are facing,
Right.
the more pressure there will be on the government to find a solution.
So it's not just about the legal battles.
Right.
It's about shifting public perception
Yeah.
and fostering a more compassionate approach to immigration.
Exactly. It's about building a Canada where everyone feels valued and respected,
Regardless of their status.
regardless of their status.
So how can our listeners get involved and help make a difference?
There are a few things people could do.
Like, what are some concrete steps people can take?
Well, first of all, stay informed.
Okay, stay informed.
Yeah. Follow reputable news sources.
Okay.
Immigration lawyers, advocacy groups on social media.
Keep up to date on the latest developments.
Exactly. Knowledge is power,
Knowledge is power.
especially when it comes to something as complex as immigration.
Right. And speaking of taking action, don't be afraid to speak up.
Yes.
Like, contact your elected officials.
Exactly. Let them know you care about this issue.
Share your concerns.
Share your concerns.
Urge them to take action.
Urge them to create a more fair and humane system.
Because ultimately, they're the ones who can make the big changes.
They have the power to make a difference.
And we as citizens have the power to hold them accountable.
Absolutely.
And you can also support organizations that are working on the ground to help families affected by this issue.
There are groups providing legal aid, emotional support, and other essential services to newcomers facing these challenges.
So even if you can't, like, donate a lot of money.
Right.
Or volunteer a ton of time. Like, just spreading the word.
Yeah. Can make a difference.
Every little bit helps.
Every little bit helps.
Absolutely. And just having conversations about this issue with your friends and family.
Yeah. Just talking about it.
Yeah.
Raising awareness.
Raising awareness, because the more we talk about it, the more likely we are to create a society that is truly welcoming and inclusive.
Right. And that's the goal.
That's the goal.
So it's not just about legal battles and policy changes.
Right.
It's about changing hearts and minds.
It's about changing hearts and minds, exactly.
It's about building a Canada where everyone feels valued and respected
and welcome. Regardless of their immigration status.
Regardless of their status.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thank you.
I think that's a really powerful message to leave our listeners with today.
I hope so.
You know, this deep dive into visitor records has revealed a complex and concerning situation.
Yeah, it's definitely complex.
But it's also highlighted the resilience
Absolutely.
and determination of the families.
You know, they're fighting for their right to be here.
Yeah.
To build a life in Canada.
To build a future.
And their stories are a reminder that we can't take our own rights and privileges for granted.
It's easy to forget.
It is.
How fortunate we are.
Yeah. So for all the families out there navigating this challenging situation, please know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
There are people across Canada who support you.
Yes.
And are working to create a more just and equitable system.
Keep fighting.
Keep fighting for your dreams.
For your dreams.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to stay informed.
Yes.
Get involved.
Get involved.
And be part of the solution.
Be part of the solution.
Together, we can create a Canada that truly lives up to its reputation as a welcoming and inclusive nation.
A place where every family can thrive.
A Canada where every family can thrive.
That's the dream.
That's the dream.
All right, that wraps up this deep dive.
That's a wrap.
Thanks for joining us.
And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep learning.
Keep learning.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Yeah, it really does raise questions about fairness and transparency.
Right.
You know, Canada prides itself on being so welcoming to newcomers.
Right.
But then you have situations like this that kind of set a very different message.
It's almost like we're saying, come to Canada, contribute to our economy.
Right.
But don't expect things to be easy or predictable.
Or even fair.
When it comes to keeping your family together.
Exactly.
And that's a problem.
Yeah, big problem.
Do you think this difference in approach between CBSA at the border wanting to let people in, and IRCC being a bit more strict with the paperwork.
Yeah.
Do you think that's intentional, or is it just like a miscommunication?
It's tough to say for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, without knowing what's happening behind closed doors.
Right.
But I think regardless of the impact on families is undeniable.
Absolutely.
It's about real people
Real people's lives.
facing potentially life-altering consequences.
It's about the stress.
Oh, stress.
It must be unbelievable.
Imagine having to deal with that.
Yeah, just the fear of being separated from your family.
It's heartbreaking.
It's awful. And it makes me wonder, like, if this were happening to Canadian citizens,
Yeah,
would we see more outrage?
that's a good question.
Would the government be more proactive in finding a solution?
It really makes you think
It does.
about whether there's a double standard at play.
Right. Like, we take for granted our rights as citizens,
We do.
but newcomers.
Yeah, they face so many more hurdles.
It's a reminder that we need to hold our government accountable
Absolutely.
for treating everyone fairly and humanely.
Regardless of their status.
So what can we do about it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are some legal challenges underway,
Okay.
which could hopefully bring about some positive changes.
So there's hope.
There's hope, yeah. I'd say cautious optimism.
Cautious optimism.
But these legal challenges could really force the government's hand
To actually address the issue.
to address the inconsistencies and create a more fair and predictable process for families.
Which is what everyone wants.
Exactly.
But what about those families who are facing this right now?
Right now.
What can they do?
I would say the most important thing is to seek legal advice
Okay.
early on.
Talk to a lawyer.
Exactly. Because there are immigration lawyers who specialize in these types of cases.
Okay.
And they can really help families navigate this complex system.
It is complex.
It is very complex.
So having an expert on your side is crucial.
It can make all the difference.
What about beyond the legal stuff?
Okay.
What about raising public awareness?
Public awareness is huge.
Yeah.
Because the more people who know about this issue,
Right.
the more pressure there is on the government to find a solution.
So it's not just about the legal battles.
Right. It's about changing hearts and minds.
Fostering a more compassionate approach
Exactly.
to immigration.
We need to create a Canada where everyone feels valued and respected,
Regardless of their status.
regardless of their status.
So how can our listeners get involved? How can they help make a difference?
There are a few things people can do.
Okay, like concrete steps.
Yeah, concrete steps. The first thing, stay informed.
Oh.
Follow those reputable news sources.
Yeah.
Immigration lawyers, advocacy groups on social media. Keep up to date on what's happening.
Stay in the loop.
Stay in the loop, exactly.
Okay.
And then don't be afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
Like, contact your elected officials.
Right. Let them know that we care about this.
Exactly. Let them know this is an issue that matters to you.
Share our concerns.
Hear your concerns. Urge them to take action.
Make some noise.
Make some noise. Yeah, because ultimately they're the ones who have the power to make the big changes.
They are.
They are.
And we as citizens have the power to,
To hold them accountable.
hold them accountable.
Exactly.
And you can also support organizations, that are working on the ground
Yeah.
to help families.
There are groups doing amazing work, providing legal aid,
Okay.
emotional support, and other essential services to newcomers who are facing these challenges.
So even if you can't donate a lot of money or volunteer a ton of time, just like spreading the word
Yeah, spreading the word.
can make a difference.
Every little bit helps.
Every little bit helps.
Absolutely. And even just having conversations about this issue with your friends, your family, your colleagues.
Just talking about it.
Talking about it, raising awareness, because the more we talk about it, the more likely we are to create a society that is truly welcoming and inclusive.
And that's the goal.
That's the goal.
So it's not just about legal battles and policy changes.
Right.
It's about changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds, exactly.
Building a Canada where everyone feels valued and respected.
And welcome.
And welcome.
Regardless of their immigration status.
Regardless of their status. Well said. I think that's a really powerful message to leave our listeners with today.
I hope so.
This deep dive into visitor records has revealed a complex and concerning situation.
Yeah, it's definitely complex.
But it's also highlighted the resilience and determination of the families affected.
Absolutely.
They're fighting for their right to be here, to build a life in Canada.
To build a future.
To build a future, and their stories are a reminder that we can't take our own rights and privileges for granted.
It's easy to forget
It is.
how fortunate we are.
Yeah, so for all the families out there navigating this challenging situation,
Yeah.
please know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
There are people across Canada who support you.
Yes.
And are working to create a more just and equitable system.
Keep fighting.
Keep fighting for your dreams.
For your dreams.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to stay informed.
Yes.
Get involved.
Get involved.
And be part of the solution.
Be part of the solution.
Together, we can create a Canada that truly lives up to its reputation as a welcoming and inclusive nation.
A place where every family can thrive.
A Canada where every family can thrive.
That's the dream.
That's the dream.
All right, that wraps up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
That's a wrap. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep learning.
Keep learning.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.